please. That really helps our comms. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get going straight away. Is everyone in? Everyone got a drink? Good to see you all. This is Centre for Social Justice. My name's Andy Cook, and I'm the Chief Executive here. And today we're discussing a topic that's close to all of our hearts about boys, lost boys and men. And this has come from work at the CSJ over the last 2 years, where lots of our small charities have said, what are you doing in this country about our boys and our men? And we're going to tackle that question today. We have got an all-star lineup to help us on this panel. We feel very high up here as well, which is quite weird. So the batting order is we're going to hear from Ed Davies, the CSJ Policy Director, who's going to thoroughly depress you all with a load of stats about what's going on with men and boys. And then we're going to hear some response from our panel. And then I'm going to go straight to you guys for questions to give you as much chance as possible. We have Alex Davies-Jones here, our great friend, Minister for Victims of Violence Against Women and Girls, and has spoken incredibly passionate on this topic for many years, actually. We have Matthew Torbett, who's a senior fellow at the CSJ and has got his own very powerful story about going into gangs, about prison, and about all else. We have Jonathan Hinder here from Blue Labour, great friend and former copper. So we've got cops and robbers. I take up that joke.
Justice Minister.
And the Justice Minister, yeah. I've been working on that all week. We have Camilla Tomney here, who Steve Reed is currently running and hiding from after the interview this morning on her show. And we have Jonathan Ashworth, a great friend of the CSJ, former shadow DWP and health, and speaks brilliantly on all these kind of topics. So without further ado, Ed, can you come and give us the top stats, please? Ed, you might struggle to stand up on that stage, actually. Has anyone got a hard hat for Ed, please?
Yeah. Right, have we got some slides, Harry? Okay, I'm afraid, as Andy says, my job is to be a bit depressing about all this. We did this piece of work because a lot of people kept coming to us and saying, there is just something going on with our boys at the moment. We were speaking to schools and youth clubs, various organisations, and they said there is something going on with our boys. So we basically tried to put numbers on it. So I'm not going to apologise for it, because what we've done is just put together statistics so that we all start this session on exactly the same page. So that first page there just shows you on that slide some of the things we did. We held a lot of visits. We looked at more than 100 data sets. We polled 1,000 to 3,000 people. 9 focus groups with young people, 97 responses to a call for evidence. It's a lot of data we collected. And I'm going to rattle through what we found. So first up, the first thing is employment. When we launched this paper, the thing that the newspapers picked up on was the switch in the gender pay gap. So if you're under 30 now, you'll earn more as a woman than a man, about 10% more. It's interesting. It doesn't necessarily mean much to me. Somebody's going to earn more than the others, but why? Why is that happening? And what we looked at is, where are men in the employment field at the moment? And what we found was they are more likely to be unemployed, more likely to be economically inactive, young people more likely to be not in education, employment or training, and the situation is getting worse. So since COVID, the number of 16 to 24-year-old men who are NEET, not in education, employment or training, has risen by 40%. It's risen in women too, but only by 7%. So there's something serious going on with young men there. So then we looked at education. What's happening upstream? And what we found is it doesn't matter where you look in education, boys are doing worse. They're doing worse in SATs, GCSEs, A-levels, T-levels. People thought vocational education, boys would do better. No, they don't. They're less likely to go to university, and they're more likely to do badly at university. But the one number on there to draw attention to is that school readiness stat. That is one of the major milestones of this government, that they want 75% of children to be school ready. 75% of girls are school ready. The problem is that only 60% of boys are. Okay, so we have a very specific boy problem there. Next slide, health. That's one of the more depressing charts you'll ever see, I'm afraid, there on the right as you look at the screen. That's about male suicide. So I think it's now fairly well known that suicide is the biggest driver of death in men under 50. What that shows you is every 5 years of life, men compared to women. It's about 3.5 times more likely to take your own life as a man. The one other stat I'm going to draw attention to is steroids at the bottom there. About 95% of steroid users are men. We don't actually know that stat. That's a complete estimate. We don't know how many people are using steroids. We think it might be as many as 1 million, but they are mostly young men. Are we depressed yet? Okay, should we make the next one a bit interactive? Let's get some interactive depression. Was anyone here born in the 1950s? 1, 2, 3, we've got a few.
Come on, John at the back, I know you were.
Oh, that's brutal. I think you've aged very well, John. If you were born in 1958, by the time you sat your O-levels, you had a 90% chance of living with both your parents. What about people born in the 1970s? Quite a lot of us. So if you were born just 12 years later in the year 1970, by the time you sat your O-levels, you had an 80% chance, so a drop of about 1% per year. Anyone born this century? Fast forward 30 years, okay, quite a few. When you sat your GCSEs, the odds of living with both your parents were about 50-50. So that drop has been about 1% per year for 50 years. There's been a huge, huge change in family structure over the last 40 years. And it's complex, difficult stuff, but it really, really matters to what's going on with our boys. Next slide. We've got just a couple more. Crime. I'll rattle through them. Crime. So crime, essentially, our prison estate and our youth estate is almost entirely men. 96% of the prison population there. And the youth estate, 97% and rising. Those last three stats on there, criminal exploitation, violent offences and knife crime, those are victim stats. Basically, about 9 out of 10 victims of those things are boys. So it is a largely male, both perpetrator and victim. Last one, tech and porn. This has obviously changed massively in the last 20 years. And again, really difficult to talk about, and I'm going to say something quite tough to hear. But to give you an example of how much it's changed, if you are over 50 here, you have a 3% chance of ever having been choked during sex. If you are under 30, it is 1 in 3. That relationships between men and women have been fundamentally changed by the online world. And we don't really know how that's going to play out in the long-term future, but we have to start looking at what is going on online because it is changing everything between men and women. I think that's all upsetting enough.
Thanks, Ed. Ed's available for kids' birthday parties, bar mitzvahs. So he's here for hire. Thanks for that, Ed. You've cheered everyone up. OK, let's hear a response from each of our panellists. And then I want to go to questions from the floor, because that's what we're here about. Alex, do you want to go first?
Oh, thanks. How do you follow that? Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Davis-Jones, Minister for Victims and Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls. But I'm the Minister for all victims. And as Ed and the report lays bare, the truth is really tough. This is something we don't talk about enough. It's not something governments of any stripe or colour have really wanted to address for whatever reason. But the report and the stats lay it plainly. If you're a boy born in this country today, you're more likely to fall behind in school. You're less likely to go to university or find stable work. You're more likely to struggle with your mental health or with addiction. And as the Victims Minister, I see the other side of this too. Boys are more likely to commit violent crime. As we've heard, our prisons sadly are full of our young men. But they are also more likely to be victims of violent crime too. And we need to be clear about that. Boys can be victims too. We all know that the reasons are complex. There are many. But part of that story is the pressure to be a certain way, to be a certain type of man. I see it every single day in the seat that I represent in South Wales, former valleys, mining town, where rugby culture and being tough, don't cry, be big, be strong, man up. Messages that we all are familiar with, these stereotypes that sadly still permeate and still sit with everyone. They stick. And right now, far too many boys are looking for meaning and a purpose, and they're not finding that in a healthy relationship or in work. They are finding that online. They are finding that in forums, in echo chambers of hate and misogyny, where they are trying to find a sense of belonging. They're being told that feminism has gone too far, that we have advanced too much, that no longer are men meant to be the providers, go out and find a job, and the woman stays home and raises children. That violence is strength. That with easy access to violent pornography, as we've heard, peer pressure, it all combines in that warped world where choking your partner is now the norm. That's what's expected of you. Women are seen as objects and status symbols to use. But let's be honest, it isn't banter. It's really, really dangerous. And I said in an earlier panel today that the other side of this is that, on average, 3 women a week in this country are murdered by their partner, by someone they know. Around 1 in 30 women a year are raped or the victim of sexual assault. That's at least 1 woman that you know. This is happening and having real-world consequences. But also, all of this is pushing young men further down that path and down that narrative. But after all of that depressing stats, all of this situation that we all face ourselves, I genuinely believe there is hope. There has to be hope, because thankfully, most men don't see the world that way. Most men value women. Most men don't want any part in this culture of hate. But right now, we need those men, and that's why I'm so pleased to see so many of them in the room tonight, because far too often, I spend my time talking to rooms of women who know all of this. They get it. I need to be talking to the men. I need to be talking to the boys about this if we're really to make a difference. We need those positive male role models who show boys, young boys, that being a man, that can be being kind. That empathy isn't a weakness, and that being vulnerable is really, really brave. And I'm really proud to actually work alongside a number of colleagues who do just that. And as a mother to boys, as a mum to boys, I also feel this deeply. And as a minister, I'm really proud that we've got this ambitious pledge to halve violence against women and girls over the course of a decade. Look, it's huge. I've talked to you about the stats that we're facing with right now. It is really, really difficult. It's complex. It's a bold goal, but it's one that we're determined to meet because we have to. The alternative is intolerable. But we've got to bring men and boys on that journey with us. We have to involve them in the conversation rather than vilifying them, making them feel like they are the ones who are wrong. Like, we have to involve them in this and bring them on the journey with us if we're really to hit that goal and really change that culture. We've brought in new RHE guidance, like prevention, education. It starts with this. Culture change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's going to be tough, it's going to be long, but it can be done. We've done it before. We've had culture changes in our country before. It can be done, but it is slow, and you have to be determined, and we are. We've announced our National Youth Strategy. Look, I could talk to you at length about the things that we have done to try and put in train some of this stuff. But legislation and policy on its own are not enough to tackle this. There's so much I could talk about. Porn, we've talked about as well. All of these things, men and boys' mental health, looking at this all in the round. And we are about to develop a violence against women and girls strategy, but I honestly feel we also need something for our men and boys. We need to pull all of this together to look at how we can best support them as a government, as ministers, looking at exactly what it is. Because if we're not going to tackle that, we're never going to hit the other goals. We're never, ever going to do it. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about this, about how you think we do it, and working together to find a way forward, because it's not easy, but it has to be done.
Thank you, Alex. Great. Matthew, great to hear from you on this.
Evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Torbit. I am a senior fellow at the Centre for Social Justice. And this is personal to me. I'm someone that was, I slept rough on the streets of Manchester as a teenager. I didn't get on with my parents, and I think partly because those of you that are parents in the room, you know, I was the eldest, so I was the trial child essentially, and you sort of get it a little bit harder, I would say. And having a younger sister who's the only girl, there are ones that definitely get spoiled afterwards. But we didn't really get on. They asked me to leave the family home. I was groomed into a gang and narrowly avoided going to prison. If it wasn't for my best friend's mum and dad taking me in, I don't know where I would be right now, but I wouldn't be sat on this stage talking to you guys. So I often talk about policy through a personal lens. I've worked in Westminster, I've advised MPs, written papers, all sorts of stuff, but I left school with no qualifications. And as I've said, I was homeless as a young lad. And I fell through many of the gaps that this report describes. You've seen the stats, and the Lost Boys report makes for uncomfortable reading, and rightfully so, because it tells us in many towns and communities, boys are growing up without male role models, without access to meaningful work, and without any real sense of belonging. We're talking about boys who are failed by the education system, pulled into gangs, or simply retreating from the world altogether. And unless we act now, I believe we risk writing off a whole generation. And for me, there's a wider aspect to this. This isn't just about boys, this is about Britain. A country that loses its boys loses its future workforce, its fathers, its neighbours, its leaders. And in a nation where postcode still trumps potential, The data's telling us what we already know, many of us, that the odds are stacked against too many young men before they've even had a chance. And the truth is, the system that doesn't know what to do with boys who fall outside the mainstream, the ones who don't fit the academic mould, who don't thrive in classrooms or don't have stable homes to go back to. We exclude them from school, we push them to the margins, and then we ask, why have they disengaged? What we need now is a plan, and I hope you guys are going to help us form that tonight. We don't need rhetoric, we've had enough of that over many years, we need a plan. And that means reforming education so that vocational routes aren't seen as second options or lesser than. It means investing in youth workers, and I think most importantly, mentoring for young boys, so that every boy's got someone in his corner, and means rebuilding institutions that give boys identity and purpose, from apprenticeships to football clubs to local employers. I've seen the difference it makes when boys are given a second chance. I like to think part of me is proof in the pudding of that. When they're listened to, not written off. When we stop talking about problem children and start addressing the problems these children face, we will begin to get somewhere. Now, I've lost count of the amount of friends I've lost to suicide, well into the double figures. Every one of them almost certainly preventable at some point. That's why the CSJ's work on this issue is vital. But reports are only powerful as the action they provoke. So I urge all of you tonight, regardless of much of the fun and games and everything else that's going to happen this weekend, let's make sure this is the start of something, not just another policy moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Very powerful indeed. Jonathan, come to you.
Thanks, Andy.
Oh, I'll give you this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I thought I'd start with something controversial. And I know that's why you've invited me here, Andy, anyway. So, you know, I thought I'd just please you straight away on that front. It's not very controversial, but boys and girls are different. And men and women are different. Which I know is a difficult thing to say at a Labour Party conference, or it used to be. But it's great that we're having this event to actually acknowledge that. Because there's something called testosterone, which means that we are wired in a slightly different way. And it's not to kind of lean into stereotypes at all, which I'll reference a little bit later. But it is important to actually acknowledge that straight off the bat. Leaning on my experience as a police officer, the kind of tack that I want to take is about crime, but also about fatherlessness. And the two are linked in terms of the experience that I had as a police officer. So something called the age crime curve, which most of you won't have heard of, but basically means that a lot of crime is committed by young men. So it sort of peaks about 19, 20, and then it starts going down sort of quite gradually. And so it's young men that commit crime in this country. And again, slightly technical police thing, but when you get arrested as a child, you need an appropriate adult to represent you in custody, to be an adult who can kind of ensure that you're getting well treated. It's so depressing, and I think this is one of the things that people say, oh, policing, that sort of conservative thing, isn't it? And actually, I think, no, you're actually sort of on the front line of deprivation and kind of understanding why people have had such a hard life. Because you ring the parent, and it's always the mum. It's always the mum. Because the dad isn't around, obviously. And they say, oh, I'm not coming tonight. Not this time, because they're already in there for, the 5th, the 10th time. But it's so telling, I think, that the dad just automatically isn't around. And I stopped thinking about that. You stop expecting there to be a father in their life because it's just not something that happens. I'm sure there were exceptions. I couldn't think of one when I was preparing for this event. And to Alex's point about violence against women and girls, I really agree with the focus on that. But homicide victims in the UK, it's mostly men killing other men. Young men killing other pretty young men. So it really is worth focusing on. And that's not to go against the importance of violence against women and girls. Absolutely. but I do think it's important we don't lose sight of that in all of this. So it's really worth talking about, and I want to talk about role models as part of that. So fathers, and this is where there might be a slight difference with the right on this, which is that fatherlessness is a huge issue, but I come at it from the perspective and declaring a personal interest. My parents split up aged 4, and my father, he's actually at the back of the room here, was a very big part of my life, and I think I'm doing okay. You know, I think I'm doing okay, and it wasn't the splitting up, you know, that actually was the problem in many of these cases. It's that they don't stick around, right? So the problem is they're not a big part of the child's life, and everyone's entitled to pursue their own happiness, right? And it is in many cases, it's right that the parents do split up for a whole variety of reasons. And there'll be cases where you don't want that father to be part of the child's life. But in most cases, stick around. And shame on you if you don't. And we need to be a little bit bolder about that and less accepting of the fact that there are so many teenage boys who are growing up without a strong male role model in their life. And there's only one person who can really provide that best male role model, and it's generally the father. So, you know, let's be a little bit more honest about that. I'll hurry up. I feel like you're urging me on. Primary school teachers. 1 in 3 primary schools don't have a male teacher. So if they're not getting it from the father, they're often not getting it from primary school either. We can sort that out, can't we? You know, we've kind of taken that angle of understanding the importance of having representation in so many other ways. So we can sort that one. And then to the kind of the public male role models. What's really a man now? You know, if you were born in 2005, and I know you said some people in here have been born in the 21st century, you know, what's driving them to Andrew Tate? If you were born in 2005, I think there's a lot of boys who think, well, I'm guilty for historical wrongs. Any sort of masculinity is toxic. And down with the patriarchy. And, you know, I get where those things are coming from, right? I want to demolish sexist stereotypes. And we've made a lot of progress in that regard. But it's on us to build something else and not drive people towards Andrew Tate. And to kind of round off on the social media point, which obviously is where Andrew Tate gets his support and where people find him, is I think we're undergoing an experiment which we don't really have any idea of what the results are going to be on adults about social media. Never mind what it's doing to children. So I think we need to be quite bold and radical about actually looking after children, stopping them from actually accessing social media, and be quite radical about it. And I'm talking about not being able to access it at all until 16. And I think there are some people who say, well, you can't hold back the tide and so forth. Well, let's see what the consequences are in a few decades. But I really think it's on us to protect our young, and particularly our young boys in this case, from being drawn to people like that. So thank you so much for holding this event and for doing this work. It really is appreciated.
Jonathan, thank you. I was just trying to work out which one your dad is, Jonathan, but there's a bit of a giveaway. Good to see you. Yeah, and you must be very proud of your lad. It's fantastic. Camilla, over to you.
I'm just going to come at this from a slightly different perspective. I wasn't brought up in a working class household. I was brought up in a very middle class household. I work for the Telegraph. I'm called Camilla. But I did grow up with an alcoholic mother, and I'm the younger sister to 2 older brothers, and a very strong father figure that carried us all through that scenario. So I've always been quite a man sort of woman, because I was basically brought up by these 2 older brothers. And I was just reflecting on what you were saying there, Jonathan. I'm the mother of 2 daughters and a son, and I worry the most about the son, which sounds counterintuitive. But I think that the panellists here have talked about the difficulties that young men can face. Who should they be? Are they too masculine? Are they not masculine enough? We've talked about the pernicious effect of social media when it comes to the real extreme end of the wedge, strangulation porn, Andrew Tate, incel movement. We'll all have seen adolescence and have made conclusions from that. But actually, if I reflect on what is the most pernicious effect on my own son, it is the kind of brain rot repetition of constant scrolling through a load of old crap. You know, this ADHD epidemic has largely been brought about since 2012. It's not a COVID thing, it's a smartphone thing. So I'm worried about young men losing hours and hours of their time on videos involving protein shakes, powerlifting, and podcasts by people we probably don't want them to be listening to. Second of all, I reflect on my own childhood and wonder how I would have been if we were in the kind of 21st century household where everyone's in their own room scrolling on their phones. You know, we got through my mum's alcoholism, you know, by watching endless... I mean, how many times was I made to watch Star Wars? Jesus. Jaws, all of the Bond films, that they enveloped me with their love, and it really helped. The other thing, that it's not an extreme thing online, it's simply that boys aren't interacting with each other, with girls. If they are interacting, they're interacting through a headset and Fortnite. You know, they're playing violent video games. They're not actually getting together. There seems to have been this kind of whole revolution where we're looking down our nose at laddishness. Oh, lads going on holiday together. My son, like most people's sons in this room, is a cheeky chappy, you know, takes the piss a bit, can be a bit gobby in class. You know, suddenly he's the enemy. We've got to let boys be boys. And we've got to let men be men. And I think what's interesting about this report is, yes, it's largely concerned with children from lower socioeconomic groups. But do you know what? Across the board, this social media, it's a cross-generational, cross-agenda, cross-class thing. It's affecting every kid, whether they're princes or they're paupers. And enough already. You know, we've experimented with a generation of children and it's gone horribly wrong. You're looking at these charts. Go and look at Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Anxious Generation, and see some of the charts he's come up with about the effect on young people's minds, hearts and souls of social media. And it has to be an all or nothing thing. We can't have some kids on it and some kids not. There isn't a parent in this room that doesn't wish that they could have brought up their kids in the 90s. And by the way, there isn't a child who doesn't wish that they were brought up in the 90s before smartphones had this overwhelmingly negative effect on their lives. So that was the perspective that I just wanted to give, more as a mum, actually, than a journalist at this stage.
Camilla, thank you.
Stand up.
I hate it when you sit on the fence about things. Jonathan.
Can I stand up? I'm not used to speaking at events where I've...
Of course you can. Go on.
No, I can stand.
You in fact, why didn't you take the
it's
main
fine.
part?
No, it's fine. That's all right. It's all right. I'll speak loud. But I'm used to standing up at Labour Party events and, when I speak. So I was out of my comfort zone, staying sat down. But can I just start by thanking for the Centre for Social Justice for inviting me along to speak. When you lose your seat in a landslide victory for your party, frankly, you're grateful for anybody inviting you to anything. But no, in all seriousness, I've long been associated with the Centre for Social Justice. And I know that you are committed to improving the conditions in which people live their lives, and it's an honour and a pleasure to be with you tonight. And I want to thank all of those who have spoke on the platform. I'm not going to go through everybody's speech like it's the Oscars or something, but I particularly want to highlight Matthews, who I think spoke with great bravery, bringing his own raw personal experience to the fore is an incredible thing to do. And I think all of us should show appreciation to him. And it is a tribute that what you are doing and the power of your example is genuinely going to improve people's lives. So thank you for what you're doing at the Centre for Social Justice. There is no solve-all mechanism for this problem. It is multifaceted. It is multi-class. It is about our culture. It is about our access to social media. It's about a whole variety of interrelated, complicated things. But I want to focus on two particular narrow things. And I want to say this, and I say it in a spirit of comradeship to those who are still in positions of leadership in my party. My time in frontline politics has come to an end, as you all know. And it is this.
Never.
Come to an end for now. You simply, in my view, will not deal with some of these issues of social decay, of some of these issues of disadvantage and problems, while we continue to accept a society where there's 4 million children living in poverty. Poverty and inequality need not be etched into the landscape of our society. And yes, there are more complicated reasons going on here. But my God, we'd be in a much better place if we were bringing the numbers of children in poverty down and not letting them increase as we are at the moment. The second thing I want to say is that I actually grew up in a different bit of Manchester to Matthew. I grew up in the north side, Cheetham Mill, in the shadow of Strangeways Prison. I'm doing an addiction podcast at the moment. Camilla has been on it. She's brilliant. The podcast with Camilla is absolutely brilliant, by the way. You should, when it's out in the next few weeks, please download it. Camilla's phenomenal on it. But I also interviewed a young man who I didn't realise until I met him to the podcast was from the same bit of Manchester I was from. But he had developed into a life of drugs, of drink, of crime, from the same bit of Manchester. And it's because in so many of our areas, our young men are just not given the opportunities that they should be given. They're not given the support, they're not given the chance to find a good, decent job. Now, this is not harking back to some sepia-tinted view of when everyone went down pit or everyone went down to work at factories. But there's a problem with the structure of our economy at the moment, where there are not jobs that give people meaning, and there are not jobs that fulfil them, and there are not jobs for which they can build a life. So yes, we've got to think about the way in which our economy is structured. The third thing is this. If you are out of work and you want a job, our system does not support you to find a decent job. I don't know if any of you have been made unemployed in recent times. I was made unemployed 14 months ago. I wouldn't have gone to the job centre. And I dare say any of you probably wouldn't go to the job centre. But if you did go to the job centre, they would send you on duff training courses, which are pointless and a waste of your time. Certainly a waste of time for the employers who are looking for workers as well. And there'll be lots of fringe events here at this conference about different aspects of public service reform, about the future of the NHS or the future of schools and all the rest of it. Very good, important fringe events. I bet there's not any about the future public service reform when it comes to job centres and employment support. We've got to look at how we better improve employment support. And actually what Pat McFadden is doing, because he's now got skills moving from the Department of Education to the DWP, I think he's got a golden opportunity to really change the way in which we offer the training, the coaching and the support for people who are out of work and looking for a job. Unless he does something like that, we will never get this 500,000 young men back into work, or a million young people who are neither in education, employment or training. If we do not get those people, young people into work now, they will be at risk of a life on the margins. That is all the evidence from social policy. If you're out of work for that period of time as a youngster, you'll never go into work and you'll never have a fulfilling life. And the final point is this. I'm very passionate about alcohol addiction, as I'm sure those of you know me know. My dad died from his alcohol addiction. We have got a phenomenon in this country now called deaths of despair. It's a phenomenon that's been in the United States for a long time. It's an increasing number of usually men, not exclusive, not always men, but majority men, dying from alcohol addiction or alcohol abuse, substance misuse problems, or suicide in their 50s. We have got a big challenge for the way in which we deliver our mental health services to deal with this problem. And I know from my own experience as a Shadow Health Secretary and dealing with some of these issues personally in my family, we have the problem that if you've got an addiction issue, mental health services say, sorry, that's an addiction problem. You can come and use mental health services when you've cleaned yourself up. And then in addiction services, they say, well, what's the root of your addiction is your mental health problem. And you get bounced between the two. Is it any wonder that so many people, particularly young men, are falling through the cracks when our systems of public services are not joined up? So that's my quick three points on how I think, points that I think need to be thought about when we're dealing with this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's so good to have you back here. It's brilliant. Right, I'm not going to ask anything. I want to go to you guys. It's your conference. Let's have some questions. We'll start down here. Let's not make these party political broadcasts. Let's just have a question. We'll take one here first.
Hi, thanks. My name is Jackie. I've written 3 things on my arm because I want to remember all 3.
Can someone get Jackie a piece of paper, please?
I have ADHD. I have children who have ADHD, autism, and a load of neurodiverse conditions. I think it's a little bit simple to say it's smartphones. I'm not saying that you're saying that exclusively, but I just want to challenge that out now. I worked for CAMS, a specialist nurse for autism, as well as ADHD and self-harm and lots of other things. And the situation has gone terribly awful for young men and for young girls at times, because we had our CAMS service decimated under the last government, and I watched it fragment and fragment and fragment until I could bear not to go to work any longer. I couldn't go and disappoint more families. I left for my own self-preservation. And the last thing I want to say is what we don't have in any policy documents that I've ever seen is the impact of intersectionality, compounding conditions, including the home situations which were factored out of any CAMS assessment. I'm so sorry. So I just wanted to say, help.
Okay, Jonathan, I'm going to go to you to respond to that. But I'm interested on the ADHD stuff. And then,
Can I just say on that, I've got very close family members with ADHD. I'm not saying it's caused by smartphones at all, but I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps.
And on the point about CAMS, obviously, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I know children's and young people's mental health services is a big priority area for Wes Streeting, and rightly so. It is a big priority for Keir Starmer. In fact, if you think about 3 or 4 years ago, his conference speech, he made some of the first commitments he made as leader of the opposition were around children's mental health services and access to treatment. I think that this is a complicated debate. Not all of it is about medicalisation, but it is certainly true. We have got to get speedier access to mental health services for those young people who need it. At the moment, there are young people in crisis who are self-harming, who are thinking the most horrendous things which I wouldn't want anyone to ever think about themselves, and yet they get denied treatment because mental health services is so overwhelmed and they get told that you are not at the level that is sufficient to get you the support that you need. That has got to change.
Alex wants to say something.
I did, yeah. Thank you, Jackie. I'm also a mum of a little boy with non-verbal autism. And the amount of men and boys in our prison estate who are neurodiverse is off the scale. Because these are boys who are misunderstood, they're not given the support that they need in school, they're not identified, they're not given that structure that they need. And then where do they end up? They fall through the cracks, and society pays the price for that. We end up fitting the bill because they end up in our prison estate because we don't know what to do with them and they don't know what to do. And these are young men and boys who are so easily radicalised because of the nature of how their brains work. And if we don't give them the necessary support, if we don't understand them, then we are writing them off from the get-go. And that is fundamentally important. And I'm really proud to say that James Timpson, who's our prisons minister, gets it. He knows that if we're going to prevent these boys from getting into the estate in the first place, we have to address SEND provision in schools, in CAMS. Did you know, like, Jonathan said that if you disclose that you've got an addiction, then you get kicked off, mental health support waiting list. If you're a child and you disclose that you're being abused, you get kicked off the CAMS waiting list. You get kicked out of CAMS. They say, we can't deal with you. So, again, we have to deal with that. And Wes gets it. He does get it. And it's part of what we're doing in terms of looking at this holistically, how we do this properly. But, yeah.
Thank you. Going to go at the back there.
Hi. Agree with most of what's been said. I think you've talked about the number of lack of interventions for young boys in the country. When I was growing up, and I've been heavily involved in youth organisations across Merseyside, and one of the biggest interventions were youth organisations where boys didn't have father figures, they had a lack of activity, but importantly had a lack of aspiration and example. So, given the fact the youth sector and organisations have been decimated by all governments for the last 30 years, what's going to be done to start to rebuild that really important intervention in young boys' lives?
Jonathan, come to you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to speak to the fatherlessness point, first of all, I think there's sometimes a risk that we kind of think there is an obvious political solution to these things. And to what I was saying in there, actually, I think politicians need to be clear about what they expect, but actually these are social problems that can't actually necessarily be solved with a political solution. You know, we can put a bill before the House of Commons, we can change the rules on what happens in these cases and so forth. But I do think we need to be honest. You know, we think that politicians can solve all these problems. They can't. You know, actually, they need to show leadership. But in many cases, actually, there is a point at which it actually does become the personal responsibility of the parents. But absolutely, when it comes to youth services, that is absolutely where people can get scooped up from those kind of circumstances. And I know this government is committed to that. And we saw the impact of that with the likes of Sure Start under the last Labour government. It's exactly those kind of interventions which can actually stop people who have unfortunately found themselves in that situation from actually slipping through the cracks.
And on that, there's a huge opportunity for partnering with philanthropy in local communities, which I don't think has been realised anywhere near where it should have been. Let's go to some young lads in the audience. Yeah, you, yeah.
Hi, thank you. So I've actually been stabbed before. I'm a victim of knife crime. I was stabbed twice. I live in South London, and that was a few years ago. And since then, I've worked in this area. And what I'd like to just come back at you a bit, Mr. Hinder, is that the number one thing, the thing that's linking everything you guys are saying here is poverty and inequality in young people. Why do young men watch Andrew Tate because he's telling them he can get them a Ferrari? Why are young people getting sucked into crime? Because they need money. Why do young men leave their families? Because they can't cope with the stress of providing for them. Well, after I was stabbed, I've been told quite frequently I don't look like the normal victim of knife crime because I'm white. But when you look at the statistics, the number one rates of knife crime in the country are in Cleveland and Yorkshire, which is 99% white, because that is the place with the greatest amount of child poverty in the country. I'd like to ask all the people in positions of power on the panel, what will the government do to solve not just absolute poverty, but the inequality that causes one young person to look at another young person and say, you have this, I deserve this just as much as you, so I'm going to take it from you. Thank you.
Very good. Great question. I'll give Jonathan a right of reply then. Matthew, I'd like to go to you.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think that is a huge driver of it. What I would say, though, is that there are lots of people who are in similar kinds of poverty to those who do get involved in this who don't. Right? So what is the difference? I think sometimes it's maybe a little bit too convenient for us to say, well, actually, if we could alleviate this poverty, then it will all go away. But there are actually people who are in that same kind of poverty who don't get involved in those kind of things. So, you know, we should be hard-headed about saying, well, what is the difference between those people who are in the same kind of poverty but don't actually end up in that? And it's not to blame anybody in particular, and certainly they're not the children. But actually there is a difference there. So I totally agree with what Jonathan said. You know, he basically spoke to your point. But at the same time, there is a difference between those people who are in that situation and get involved and those people who manage to avoid it. So I think I'm just trying to make that distinction there.
Yeah, I think, actually, thank you for your powerful point. I thought you were spot on. I actually think you and the gentleman at the back are quite linked, because I think not only is it just poverty, but it is also a lack of aspiration whilst trapped in that poverty that makes people feel like they don't have a choice. I will always say, yeah, we have a choice. I had a choice to maybe not do what I did, but you don't feel like you've got anything but a choice. So I think there's, and actually even think about it growing up, you know, my mum and dad was a postie, mum was a cleaner. That was what people like us did. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I said I wanted to go and do other stuff, my dad would say, you've got a head full of magic. It was just like, we don't do that stuff. So I think there's an element of personal responsibility of, let's not give false hope, but let's give our young lads the future that they want to dream of and do that. And I definitely think, I know it's an easy sort of thing to blame everything on. Social media's got a massive part to play. Gareth Southgate, when he referenced the Young Boys paper at the Dimbleby lecture, I thought put it very succinctly in that when he was growing up, the only people, and even when I was growing up, the only people you had to compare yourself to were other lads on the estate or people at school. Now you have a whole world of people to compare yourself to, and therefore you feel like you're failing because you're not at those unobtainable levels of Andrew Tate and his supercars and women and whatever else. And I think all of those things are quite inextricably linked. What we do about it, I'm going to leave to the politicians, is a hell of an answer to try and find.
Just quickly, if I can. So aspiration, inspiration is massive here. The last Labour government lifted me out of poverty. I was the first in my family to go to university. My dad was a miner. My mum worked in a bingo hall. That, like Matthew said, that didn't happen to people in my community. I became an MP. Those things don't happen to people like me, because as a young girl, I was told I could be anything I wanted to be. And I believed it. And I saw female politicians for the first time who were from my background who were doing it. Camilla mentioned we need to let boys be boys and men be men. What does that mean now in 2025? They need to be told that they can be anything they want to be. They need those role models. They need that aspiration. They need that inspiration. And it could be done through philanthropy. It could be done through the men and boys who have made it from those towns, going back, talking to them, going into the schools, really being those mentors and being that figure that they can say, I could do that. I can do that if I want to. I can get a good job. I can break the mold. I can break the cycle. But we need to have, as Jonathan said in the end, we need to have an economy where they have jobs to go to. We need to give them something in order to have that sense of purpose again. And that's what Labour governments do. And that's what I'm excited about with this Labour government.
OK, thank you. Right, we're going to have, we'll take two now, and then I'm going to go to the panel. What's your big idea? What was it, if you could do one thing, what would you do to change the futures of boys and men? So let's do two questions together if you can. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Do I need to answer your question?
Pardon?
Do I need to answer your question? Sorry, I just got confused for it.
No, if you ask it, I mean, you can ask me a question if you want.
That's okay. Well, I'll start by saying that I find this very, very, very compassionate, what all of you said. It's so compassionate towards young boys, which is what they need. When we look at Muslims, we see that young men who use a lot of social media are getting radicalized. And we had Prevent in our mosques post 9/11, in our spaces, you know, policing us to make sure we're not getting radicalized. But we don't have Prevent in social media now. However, Prevent didn't work anyway. Prevent radicalized people further because Prevent wasn't compassionate. Prevent was locking people in for having simple conversations. What we saw working was being compassionate towards them. Being compassionate towards the young men who were getting radicalized is what got them out of that radicalism. Is because, as Jonathan said, they were in despair, and their despair was getting used to radicalize them. What I see right now in the UK is, with the young boys, is them getting radicalized with Reform, because Reform is the party who is the most in TikTok. What young people consume every day in TikTok is a lot of Reform propaganda, and their despair is being used by Reform. They have so much despair, and I think we need to be compassionate towards them. Jonathan just said that it's not just poverty that is, you know, making people do knife crimes or whatever, but I think it actually is, you know. If it's not making them stab someone, it's making them abuse their families, it's making them hurt their own selves. Poverty always has an impact, and we need to be very, very compassionate towards those people who've been failed for generations. I think the Labour government is very compassionate, and we need to keep being compassionate to those people, and I believe the Labour government won't keep failing these people, and I think, yeah, it's wonderful that you're being compassionate.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great. We'll have a final question from the back there.
Thank you. Lenny Cornwall from Richmond, North Allerton. I feel I've got to speak because I'm a psychiatrist and I work in Middlesbrough, so that's top for poverty, top for knife crime, top for suicide as well, actually. My thought, going to Jonathan's point, what does testosterone do to you? It's about competitiveness. It makes you more competitive. So we've got to think about, and it goes to Matthew's point about who are you being competitive with in your environment. Previously, you're competitive with the people around you. Now you're in competition with the rest of the world. There's no way of competing at that level. That's one point. Second point is, as a young man, if you're in trouble, who do you come in contact with? At school, all the teachers are female. If you come into the mental health service, I'm the only man in my team. The rest are all women, psychologists, psychiatrists, nurses. That needs to change.
Very good. Jonathan, you speak about testosterone.
I thought that was I said this, Jonathan.
You go for it. Both of you can.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I'm really glad Matthew made that point about the comparison. I think that there's a big read across to a lot of politics that we're seeing at the moment, is that actually people's reference points are completely different to what they were even only 15 years ago. So to their own lives, but also what's going on in other parts of the world or other parts of the country. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think channeling that competitive nature into something useful and meaningful is a really helpful way of actually dealing with this.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to ask for the panellists each final point from you. We've talked a lot about the issues, been quite a few different thoughts come out. What's the one thing you'd do to try and change this around? We'll start with you, Jonathan, at the end.
Well, look, there's not one single intervention that's going to resolve this, and I don't think anybody in the audience would expect there to be. I just want to say this. A child born right now in Liverpool, or a child born right now in Manchester or Glasgow or Birmingham or inner city areas is likely, and that a boy born right now, is likely to grow up on average to live around 15 years less than a woman. And that child born right now, a boy born right now, is more likely to be admitted to hospital, whether A&E for tooth decay, to need mental health services, less likely to get the relevant immunisations they're supposed to get as a baby, is more likely to develop addiction problems, and is probably more likely to go on to suffer and get involved in all kinds of other problems in their life. This government, in my view, needs a big, all-encompassing strategy to deal with poverty and deprivation and the social determinants of ill health and mental ill health in life. And it can get there, and I think it will get there. And when it gets there, I hope it shouts about it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
I've got a very practical idea which was inspired by a guy in America that does this, and he set up in a school a fathers network to help all of the boys that didn't have fathers do basic things: how to tie a tie, how to go on a first date, how to conduct a job interview. I think that when we look in schools, PTAs are often dominated by women. I think we should have a movement that sets up a fathers network in every school. You don't need that many fathers, maybe 5 to 10, who are there and made available to boys who might have fathers but problems in relationships with their own fathers, boys who don't have fathers, to provide a sort of network in every educational establishment to support boys that aren't so lucky. I think like society has to kind of rise up and meet this challenge. It can't all be left to the state. If there are functioning, good, attentive male role models, they don't need to be celebrities or footballers. They could just be the ordinary blokes that run the scout huts, run the football clubs, do the cricket in the summer. Get those networks in school in a similar manner to the PTA so that young boys who aren't so lucky get practical support on the ground.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of that scene in The Thick of It where they say, so you want a policy that's free, universally popular, and is it something like can be announced this afternoon? I think I've got one. Just ban social media for under 16s.
Yeah.
You all get a brick. You all get a brick phone. Go outside and speak to other human beings. I mean, if Keir announced that on Tuesday, I think it'd be universally popular. It is free, and we'd all be better for it. So why don't we just do it?
Heard it here first.
Oh, wouldn't that be the utopia? Sad thing is, it's not sadly realistic. Because, as you know, they will get around it, and kids will access what they want to access. So what we need to do is education. We need to really work with kids. We need to listen to our boys. We need to listen to our men. We need to understand them. As I said, stop vilifying them. And as Jonathan on the end said, I think I've got some work to do looking at a strategy and a mission, delivering this across government. The same way we are looking to tackle violence against women and girls, how do we support our men and boys in order to meet all of these targets? So I guess that's my next job.
Mine might be a little bit simplistic, and I don't mean to be sort of glib with this sort of stuff, but I think having governments of all types, no, this isn't just a Labour Party issue, this is anybody that gets into power's issue. Placing a higher potential on human life and how we want to live our lives in a politics dominated by numbers and measurements of GDP and whatever else is people at the heart of policy. And I will leave you with a quote that I can't claim, unfortunately. I went to see a friend's play the other night called Punch. A gentleman that's gone, you know, was on the wrong side of the tracks, and had his life story made into a play. James Graham's done that. There's a line at the end where the mother of a victim has come face to face with the perpetrator, and they're working towards restorative justice. And she said, you know, it was the probation officer, sorry, his probation officer said that she was sick of the probation sector, it was getting torn to bits, put out a lot of public sectors under the last 14 years. And she said, do you know potholes? If you get there quick enough, it'll cost you £50 when a pothole begins. And when they grow and grow, it'll cost you hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And people get so angry, and governments and councils get really angry about potholes. Why do we get it about potholes and we don't get it about people? And that, for me, is where the crux is. We've got to put people at the heart of every single policy that we put forward, and that's where the Lost Boys comes into play.
Well, can't improve on that. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you to everyone on this panel. We're not going away on this subject. We need ideas, we need energy, we need thoughts, so please stick with us. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Yeah. Done that. Got Nandi in the bag. Had a
He
lovely
said he
chat
was
with
after
her.
asking you to go, by
And
the way,
then,
Jacob. He was asking who
I
would
think I
be
was
good.
speaking to Nick Thompson.